We're talking trade and tariffs today, and our special guest is Leo Gerard, the international president of the United Steelworkers. Leo, you know, the counter-argument that we hear from some, and certainly many politicians from outside steelmaking area, is that this is protectionist and that it's going to lead to a trade war. I mean, the side of me, well, there's one side of me that says we're in a trade war and we're losing.
Exactly.
So we ought to be doing something. But what's your reaction to those comments? Is this going to lead to some kind of trade war that's going to deny American the products, the foreign products that they like?
No. I mean, I love quoting Joe Biden. That's malarkey. And the fact of the matter is that when we did it, Section 201 under George Bush, there were stronger penalties there. They were 35%. Mm-hmm. And what we saw was some price stability in the steel market, but we didn't see anyone sort of yelling and screaming and raising the price of their automobile or raising the price of a tin can.
Right.
And in fact, Secretary Ross did some analysis of what this would mean to a can of Coors beer. 1/2 of 1/10 of 1%.
Is that right?
Per can.
Yeah.
So, look at the globalists, the free traders, are trying to panic people into thinking that their prices are going to go through the roof. When the tariff that we had in 201 expired, mm-hmm. I didn't see anybody dropping their prices. You know.
Right.
So this is just, again, it's scare tactics, and if you need to be in business by getting your supplies from a country that cheats and breaks the rules, would you be in favor of someone stealing the bumper off your car?
Yeah.
I mean, they're stealing our jobs. China's not exporting just steel and aluminum, paper and tire and rubber and all that. They're exporting unemployment.
You know, I think we in Pittsburgh could make a special case for steel in any case because of the national security issues, the economic security issues. I was told, and maybe you can verify this, that the United States is the only industrialized nation in the world that does not satisfy its own domestic steel needs. In other words, taking imports into our market. And those imports range from 30 some months, 40% of the market. Yeah. Most industrial countries, modern countries, get all their steel from their own steel mills because they know how important it is.
Except Costa Rica.
Except Costa Rica, right, right.
Yeah. And by the way, the other countries...
Is that true, by the way?
It's generally true. Canada's in the same boat. Mm-hmm. Really? Canada doesn't produce enough steel, so that its largest supplier of steel to Canada is America. Yeah. And different kinds of steel, so it's generally accurate. Britain is now in a position, because they've lost most of their steel mills, they're going to need to import, but they think because they're part of the EU that they'll be able to work out some kind of deal. But America, think about what I said. 15 years ago, we made 135 million tons. Now we make 85, but we still consume 135, 136 million tons. Who's getting that business? And because they're getting it, they're depressing the ability of our steel companies mostly to earn the cost of capital. If you can't earn the cost of capital, your business is going to deteriorate over time. Right. And that's why I'm pleased that the steel companies that we're dealing with are seeing that as a result of this, they're going to put more into their plants. They're going to modernize their facilities. They're going to reline blast furnaces. They're going to modernize pipe mills. And I think that that's good. It's not all going to come in the form of wage increases. I mean, we'll fight about that, which we should, but we're also going to fight about making capital investments to make sure that these mills are there for the future.
Right.
So there's a little bit of funny incongruity here, or awkwardness, with the labor movement, traditionally Democratic, supporting in this case a Republican president. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Particularly a Republican president who siphoned off a lot of votes from your members.
Look, here's what we know. I detest when they call it the Rust Belt. It's derogatory. Right. The industrial heartland. If you look at the industrial heartland and what happened, is you got to give the president credit. He knew what the average guy and the average woman was thinking. They're fed up of living on the edge of losing their job. And he played to that fear, and he stole basically the steelworker agenda. We've been talking of fair trade, the things we've been fighting about forever, punishing those countries that cheat. He played to our members' weakness, and which was his strength.
And his attack on China was about as strong as anybody I've ever seen run for office.
Now, he hasn't done anything yet, but that's after a year, but he did that. And you're right, that our members, a lot of them voted for him. And look at, for me, my big disappointment is that we've been trying to get Democrats to do this for 30 years.
Right.
And they should have done it. There's a big internal debate we're going to have.
Two Democratic presidents over 16 years. Yeah.
And if you look at Ronald Reagan did quotas and stood up for steel industry, the auto industry.
George W.
Yeah, George W. did it. We had rallies here in Pittsburgh. And now Trump did it.
Yeah.
But you got nothing from Clinton.
Nothing from Clinton or Obama.
And why is that? Is it because there's just too strong of a, quote, free trade wing in the Democratic Party?
I think part of it is that 95% of Republicans are free traders and 23% to 25% of Democrats in the House are free traders. When you put that block together, it's almost like the NRA. You got to crack it.
Because Republicans have been free traders for generations.
Forever.
Yeah, at least since 1930,
Yeah, and so, but look at, if we look at what happened in Pennsylvania 18 with Connor said, yeah, that he supported the tariffs, and he gave the reason why, and he laid out his position. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the leadership are now aggressively talking about long-term stability. And I repeat again that our members aren't looking for special treatment. We're looking for a level playing field. And how can you not be for giving workers in this country a level playing field to compete against China? What would it take to give us a level playing field against China? Figure it out and let's pass it. What would it take to stop something like South Korea did, that dump Chinese steel to build tubes so they can ship them here, and literally not drill an inch in their country but plan to destroy our market?
Is it such a difficult concept that if we allow a certain product to be marketed in the United States, that foreign country should allow our product, the same product, to be sold in their country under the same rules? I mean, that's fair trade.
But it's more complicated than that, because it's the price of the steel that comes here that's really the issue, rather than than our exports.
But
is that so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the foreign countries have ways to delegitimize the price. I mean, they subsidize, they dump,
Listen, there's all kinds of things that are designed by those countries to penetrate the American market. We tried to file a case with the support of President Obama on auto parts. But we couldn't determine what an auto part was. Is it the brake shoes? Is it the steering wheel? What is it?
Right.
So what we did, with the help of the president's economic people, we did a bit of research, and we found that China gave every exporting country that exported auto parts to America a 15% give back.
Oh, really?
So here we're trying to find a way what an auto part is. China gave it to everybody.
Well, you know, speaking of automobiles, I had someone tell me that take a German car sold in the U.S., there's a 2% duty or charge on it. I'd like a tariff on a German car sold in the U.S. An American car sold in Germany has a 10% tariff or markup. That's not fair. That's not even-handed.
That's right.
It seems to me it would be relatively simple for us to say, look, no German cars in the U.S., period, not at all, unless you allow American cars on the same basis.
Let me say that as annoying as that fact is, and it's an accurate fact, once you go to Japan, once you go to South Korea, once you go to China, that 10% is minuscule. You can't sell a Harley in one of those countries without 100% duty. So you're going to sell Harleys from here into there? Guess what? Harley's now building a factory, and guess where they're building it?
Right.
In Asia.
I'm sure.
So, Leo, the people who don't agree with you say that the flood of steelworkers, or the diminishing numbers of steelworkers, is due more to automation than to competition. What do you say to that?
malarkey.
A little bit malarkey.
Malarkey.
Okay.
But look, I won't run away from it.
Yeah.
We've been very proud, our union, and working with the industry, and you look at the kind of stuff we do together with the industry. I'm really proud of the fact that we bargain with them capital improvements, and that we're proud to say that on average, steel from America is the lowest man hours per ton in the world.
Most efficient.
And on environmental issues, the American and Canadian steel industry met the Kyoto protocols 5 years after they were passed.
And would you talk a little bit about China and environmental?
Yeah, China and environmental, for every ton of carbon that we produce making a ton of steel,
Right.
they produce 3, 4, 5, 6 times as much carbon into the atmosphere. And I joke with people, it's not called Pittsburgh warming, it's called global warming. So let's go do something about who the real polluters are.
Right. We've got 30 seconds or less.
Okay.
Connor Lamb,
Yes.
is he congressman-elect because of the United Steelworkers?
He's congressman-elect, first of all, on his own behalf because he ran a really terrific campaign and he shared our values. Secondly, we had a lot of people on the ground. We worked real hard. We knocked on doors, and our objective was to prove that a grassroots campaign can beat dark, unreportable money. And what we did is the grassroots campaign of talking to people face to face beat that dark money that ran, I was going to say a bad word, that ran some pretty awful commercials.
Right. Leo Gerard, thank you, sir, very much for coming in and sharing with us. This is it's always an education, and we're glad to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
David Shriven and I will be back with some final thoughts when the KDPG Sunday edition continues in just a few moments.